G'day, I'm Rob.
And I'm Dave.
And you're listening to the Doctor Who Show's hot take of Season 2, Episode 7, Wish World by Russell T Davies. Hello, Dave.
Hello, and I'm looking forward to talking about my all-time favourite episode of Buffy, The Wish. No, sorry. We're going to talk about one of my favourite Marvel TV shows, WandaVision. No, that's not right. We're going to talk about an episode from my favourite Star Trek, Far Beyond the Stars. Oh, no, that's right. We're talking about Doctor Who Wish World. My apologies.
Maybe Belinda Vision is appropriate here tonight, Dave. Yes. I watched this about 3 hours ago at the time of recording. I'm putting my cards down on the table, but you're coming in hot, Dave.
Yes, I went to the football instead of watching it at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
And my team lost, so
dear.
It wasn't worth it. But actually it was a good game, so I don't mind. And an Australian won something in soccer this week.
Yes, he did.
And Foster-Coglu, one of Australia's greatest coaches, won Eurovision's soccer contest or something.
And Hayden Gribble, a friend of the show, is a Tottenham Hotspur fan, and he's very excited about it. I know that much.
Yes, I assume named after the Hotspur from the Hornblower series.
I'm not sure about that, but...
Starring Paul McGann.
That's true. Look, I can see we're dancing around getting into the episode, but before we do, I'll say one other thing. I've spent most of the past 3 hours, Dave, cooking, eating dinner with my wife, walking the dog around the neighbourhood, avoiding a lot of social media unless people were directly messaging me. I tried to keep my thoughts pretty rough about this one.
Nope, fair enough. Well, my thoughts are fresh.
Okay.
10 minutes ago I pressed stop. 14 minutes ago I pressed stop on it, so...
Well, let's get into it with our words of the week. What's yours, Dave?
My word of the week is Akbar.
Akbar. My word of the week is alcohol.
Alcohol. Okay.
Well, how do we start? That was a bit of a mess in places, wasn't it?
So, it's interesting, Rob. I came into this one with a couple of mixed thoughts. The first important thought was that overall, so far, I have enjoyed Series 2 of RTD2 Gatwa, whatever you want to call it, quite a bit more than I've enjoyed Series 1. Although there have been episodes I've found fault with, I haven't really disliked anything the way I disliked a number from last year. So it's very, very positive. I was also very aware that RTD has a very mixed record when it comes to paying off seasons. I think that Parting of the Ways is awesome. I think the one that comes after Stolen Earth...
Journey's End?
Journey's End, thank you, is awesome. I think some of his others are pretty terrible, including, frankly, last year's, which sort of fell apart completely. Different people like different ones. Some people think the one where Rose beats Daleks and Cybermen in a great big wank fest and gets her own doctor is awesome. I think that's terrible. Whatever. So I sort of went in going, you know what, RTD's doing better this year than last year. Although my views on last week are getting worse the more I think about it, but that's for the cold take. But just, I didn't know what to expect. And you said it was a mess. It probably is. But I was along for the ride on this one. I was intrigued throughout about what was going on. I was making notes of some cool antecedents, and I did a bit of a bit on that at the start, as you can tell. I was surprised by a couple of things. I was genuinely curious to find out who the one who waits was. So I was on board for this ride.
That's interesting. And do you need to come out as a WandaVision fan at this point? I mean, we've already made 2 WandaVision jokes, but I know that you watched it and I believe you liked it.
I watched it. I really liked it. I love the sequel series, Agatha All Along, which was really good with Joe Locke. I've watched WandaVision twice, which is more than I can say about any other of the Marvel series. So yes, I am a fan of WandaVision. A genuine fan.
All right. Well, I think this is going to be an interesting chat tonight because I think we're coming from 2 slightly different directions. At first, Dave, I thought this was going to be really okay. Once we were past that Bavaria scene and the Rani having magical powers, that seemed a bit silly and had no explanation, and by the end still has no explanation. Although, I will say a shout out to the wife being turned into flowers. If anyone recalls our recent Father Time episode, I flagged the moment an alien device in that story starts turning people into roses as a really cool visual, and wouldn't it be great to see that on TV? We saw it tonight on TV.
I had the same note, Rob. I also had the same thought about why can she do magic now. I kind of get where it may have been coming from, because in the Mark of the Rani, she does turn people into trees.
Oh, yeah.
So I saw that link back where she's turning people into plants and owls and mallards, but when she turned people into trees, yes, she used a great big prop that was a piece of tech, not just, magic powers. So
breathing on people, Dave.
yes, so yes, I did say why does she have magic powers, not tech? But
okay,
is this meant to be a reference to the Rani does turn people into plants? Because she does.
Okay, but look, we got past that, and then I thought, okay, we're doing weird. The Doctor's in bed with Belinda. They have a clearly perfect life. They have a child. I don't mind when Doctor Who does weird. It's quirky. People get to act in ways they don't normally act, and that's quite fun. I adore things like Amy's Choice, for example. So I have zero problem with weird, Dave. Let's be crystal clear on that. And I'm thinking at this point, I might be going to like this. Let's see where it goes. I had a really open mind early on.
Yeah, I like you, was seeing antecedents that I liked and was up for it. I mean, WandaVision was a really, really obvious one, particularly with it starting that 1950s setting. More on that in a moment. But yeah, look, I like weird alternate realities. As I said at the start, The Wish is my absolute favourite episode of Buffy. I think most Star Trek fans are big fans of Far Beyond the Stars, which is the one where Sisko has the vision of all the crew of Deep Space Nine in the 1950s, where he has to deal with being a black writer who isn't accepted, etc. It's a very powerful and just a wonderful episode of Deep Space Nine, and partly because of what you said, Rob, the cast get to be different characters, which is what they were sort of doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. But then, Dave, a missed opportunity, because we get to Mel on the street outside, and I thought, oh my God, this is the chance to pull out the shot and have loads of ex-companions living on his street, putting out their bins, going for a jog. Wouldn't that be great? But they didn't do it. I thought that seemed such a cool and obvious thing to do. It wouldn't cost much. It's a day's filming at best for a group of people who mostly don't even act very much. They could have worked at scale. It could have created a really fun scene that the Doctor lived on a street with all his ex-companions. Wouldn't that have been fun?
Look, yes, it would have. I agree with you. I think that the problem, Rob, is that we're meant to care about the cast of UNIT as much as we care about companions from the 1970s.
Ah, right. Okay.
You know, we're meant to care that Kate Lethbridge Stewart is there, and oh my God, Colonel Ibrahim is there. That's meant to be as big a deal. And maybe for some of the audience, for a more modern audience, that is as big a deal as, oh my God, there's Tegan Javanka.
Well, that's a nice segue, because the Doctor then goes to work, and I'll say it, UNIT becoming an insurance agency I think was quirky and fun. I could go with that. That wasn't Chibnall turning it into a hotline in real life. This is like some altered state where it's an insurance company. I laughed.
And I got Loki vibes out of that a bit as well.
Okay. But then we hit the Doctor likes a man. That's bad. That's reportable. And I'm like, that's a bit messagey maybe? Or is it just trying to tell me something about the world they're in? Or is it both? And then it didn't sort of go anywhere. So I was like, what just happened there?
Yeah, I was looking for messagey stuff now because of how fundamentally unsubtle the messaging has been from RTD across this year and last year, frankly, and probably some of his earlier run as well, but a lot stronger and less subtle these last couple of years. So I was looking for it. I did wonder if they were going to go for and do a real, we all have nostalgia for the 1950s, but whilst life was simpler there, it was a time where if you were a straight white male, life was pretty good and pretty structured, but if you were a woman, then yes, you had to be a good girl, then a good wife, then a good mother. If you were homosexual, then yes, you either lived as a lonely, eccentric bachelor, or you were arrested and, your life ruined. Interestingly, they didn't do anything with Ncuti Gatwa's race, which I thought they may have been going for as well, because obviously being black in the UK in the 1950s would not have been as comfortable as it would have been for others. So I was waiting for this sort of whole, we've gone back to this time that all of mankind thinks is a wonderful golden age, but it was only a golden age for some people and it's not for these people. And then when the disabled people came in as well, it was like, the disabled did not get the care and the attention and the support that they would have, that they do today. So I don't know whether that was just a passing thing, or I'm reading more into what than it meant, or something's going to come out of this next episode, or it was just the 1950s weren't that great for the gays. I don't know.
I think that would have been a more interesting route to go down because, not long after we do have the group of disabled people, they seem to be living rough out on the streets, and they can see the truth of the world because they're not seen by the society. And it's like, okay, the RTD sledgehammer's definitely out here. And it's being swung on a topic he's been so vociferous about since he told us Davros has legs and is just some normal guy a few years back. And again, what was it telling me about the world? Still, nothing really outside of something is going on. Which, I could tell from the moment the Doctor and Belinda woke up in bed together. I know something is going on. What else is there? Will there be more? Or is that going to be bypassed in the next episode?
So, thinking aloud here, the world was created by Conrad. It's Conrad wishing that causes the child to create the world. Conrad is doing the wishing. So, is the fact that Conrad is the type of person that yearns for the idealised 1950s without all the faults and where, gay people didn't exist and disabled people didn't exist and immigrants didn't exist. Is that meant to be his ideal world because he's a online fascist or whatever we want to call him? These are the rules. Is there some connection there between Conrad and the 1950s idealism, etc., etc.?
Because we do learn not long after that it is Conrad's world. That's why he's been selected from his jail cell. But specifically for what? I don't know. Do we take away now that Conrad is a homophobe? I think so. That he doesn't think much of the disabled? I think so. He whinges about having to do the thinking, though. So he seems to actually have to keep thinking, even though he's channeling it through the child. Like he says, if I forget something, South Africa floods, and all of this sort of stuff. So the child is maintaining the world, but Conrad is creating the world. That got a bit clunky there for me.
Yeah, look, I rolled with it. It had Enlightenment vibes to me. I think that idea that the child has the power to create things, but cannot imagine them. So they need the imagination of a human to feed the power. I kind of went with that. I actually quite liked and was intrigued by the use of Conrad in that way, in that I think the small amount of pre-publicity that I had seen and the publicity shots and the like that had been circulated by RTD that came across my eyeballs did have this sort of vibe of the triumvirate and the Rani and Conrad, and then there was like, but the Rani only counts for one in the triad. There's something else going on, and I was sort of expecting almost a sort of a consorts type relationship, and so we initially go down that path in a very 1984 sort of Big Brother way, where Conrad is the one that's telling everybody how to think and to relax and all that sort of thing, and that's a trope of sci-fi going back, at least to Eric Blair in 1984, certainly probably before. But the fact that he was as much a tool of the Rani as anyone, and a prisoner of the Rani as anyone, I think was actually quite a nice twist I wasn't expecting, and I quite liked that. As with a lot of these things, subject to where that leads and where that goes next week.
Yeah, that much is clear, because he's like, oh, God, I'm so tired. He's clearly being worked here. He's been worked over.
Yeah, he hasn't been fed recently, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I'll get to that in a sec. Why he has this Time Lord sort of fairy tale to tell the world, though, surely that's not his wish. I mean, has the Rani told him to give the world that story? Why? Again, don't know.
Yeah, I wondered if that was meant to be feeding the doubt of the Doctor that the Rani needed to create. But given that we never really saw the Doctor or John Smith interacting with that story, there was no sort of moment of John Smith busy eating dinner, and then Conrad says, and Doctor Who went and met Rassilon, and there was no moment of sort of John Smith going, Rassilon, hang on, that means something. So maybe there were some cutscenes there, or maybe we've missed the point entirely, or maybe there's no explanation. I don't know.
Yeah, I just don't know why it's going out to the whole world, or at least all of London, at least, if it's really just for the Doctor.
I mean, it could be one of those RTD things where it's happening because he wants the audience to hear it, and the in-story explanation doesn't exist because, it's RTD.
Yeah. You mentioned Conrad being hungry, so let me pull up this note. I've got, the Rani now flies in on Flash Gordon's rocket cycle, and Mrs. Flood makes Conrad a sandwich. And written down as notes, it looks so stupid, Dave, so let me read that again. The Rani flies in on Flash Gordon's rocket cycle, and Mrs. Flood makes Conrad a sandwich.
Huh, okay. I got Wizard of Oz vibes from that, but yeah, okay, no, you're right, yep.
Yeah, where Flash flies out of the war racket Ajax on the back of the little rocket cycle.
Yeah, no, now you've said that to me, I can absolutely see it, but I must admit I got very sort of Surrender Dorothy, Wizard of Oz vibes from that.
Oh, interesting.
It's probably just reflects which movie the two of us have each watched more.
Yes, it does. From there, we just seem to go into a lot of special effects and the Rani ranting and at one point pulling the Doctor to the balcony in this really sort of over-the-top half-dancing way. I mean, I know they've been dancing, and she pulls out that line that they once danced while some city burned, and I thought, why would the Doctor have done that? I don't know. Park that idea. She seems to act a bit more like Missy in places, and truly, I'm sitting there none the wiser at that point as to what's going on. And then next thing, they need the Doctor to doubt the world, so it cracks open the Underverse, and they'll find Omega. I was like, what? Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So, look, the dancing and the, we danced at the Fall of Persephone or whatever it was, I thought was very just, RTD going back to the stuff he used to do about the Time War, I rescued Javros from the jaws of the Nightmare Child at the fall of the city of wherever it was.
But that sounded like something the Doctor might have done. Dancing with a mortal enemy while the city burns doesn't sound like something the Doctor would do.
Yeah, so look, I don't quite understand yet what the Rani is about, what the Rani is doing, why the Rani is doing it. Was it a perfectly adequate performance from the actress whose name escapes me as the Rani? Sure it was. I'm glad she's not trying to do a Kate O'Mara impression. I think that was a very good decision. But, and this is one of those interesting things, when we get a new version of the Master, whether it's Sacha Dhawan or Michelle Gomez or whatever, there have been multiple iterations of the Master before, so we're used to sort of being able to pull different threads of the Master's personality from Roger Delgado and Peter Pratt and Jeffrey Beavers and Anthony Ainley and Eric Roberts, etc., etc., etc. Whereas the Rani is Kate O'Mara. Up until this week or last week, the Rani is Kate O'Mara. So you either do Kate O'Mara or you do something completely not Kate O'Mara, which then you go, well, I don't know. I think there's something weird and maybe difficult about being the second regeneration rather than the 6th or 7th or 8th, whatever we get it from the Master.
Well, technically, Mrs. Flood is possibly the next one.
Well, that's true, but I mean, she didn't do anything Rani-ish either.
No.
So other than turning people into plants and animals, I didn't see anything particularly Rani-ish. Willing to hold that thought till next week, but yeah, and even when she says, by the way, this isn't just exposition, like, that doesn't give you an excuse for the fact that you stand around doing a lot of exposition. Like, the fact you acknowledge you're standing around doing a lot of exposition isn't a get-out-of-jail free card, however meta it might be.
I thought that was their day for the 3 dozen Doctor Who podcasters around the world who'd be sitting there going, what's all this exposition? Then she turns around and says, this is an exposition, the Doctor needs to know it. They covered it with a line, Dave, it's what we always ask. And he did it.
Yeah.
I'm being facetious.
Yeah. No, you are. And it amused me, but it doesn't make it right either.
Of course.
Look, you mentioned it before, Rob. Let's talk about it. The big reveal. Not that I knew that we were going to have a big reveal, but apparently we were going to have a big reveal. And there's a big reveal coming. There's the one who waits. And I was going, who is it? You know what? They're going to tell me in 20 minutes. I'm not going to stress about it. And it's Omega.
Yeah. Not that we have much to go on, like, what's he look like this time around? What's he going to do in the next episode? Is it going to be like Sutekh? We bring back this big name, but it's kind of an embarrassing version of them, and they get vanquished in 45 minutes?
Yeah.
Is that worth it?
And because I literally pressed stop on this setup and came to record this, I haven't had time to even check if Stephen Thorne is still alive and can do the voice.
I have no idea. Myself, no.
So maybe we are going to get a voice as we did with Gabriel Wolfe playing Sutekh.
Yeah, maybe. Cards on the table, I couldn't tell at the end there whether this was the real Earth, because we were being told that Conrad's dreamed this all up, yet there are people who remember the real Earth, in quotation marks, like Ruby remembers living through 2025. So is that actually Ruby, or a dreamed up Ruby who has memories of the other Ruby, if there is another Ruby? Like, could we potentially kill Ruby and Mel in this world? Like, everything's falling apart at the end and the building's going to fall on them. I think it was a unit... The unit helipad was going to fall on them at the end. Can we actually kill them and that's okay because they aren't actually the real ones? That said, the distinct inference is that Poppy is really the Doctor's child with Belinda. So that child is real in this world, and I presume the Doctor and Belinda are real in this world. But I couldn't tell if the world was actually real, like it was a morphed version of our world, or it was an all-new version of our world. I'm really confused, honestly.
Yeah, so look, genuine minor spoilers for WandaVision for about the next 60 seconds. If you don't want that series spoiled for you, flick forward a minute. Perhaps because I have seen WandaVision and I felt very strong WandaVision vibes right from the opening scenes of this episode, I took this to be a WandaVision-style world where it is the original world, but everything transformed by the power of, in that case, Wanda, in this case, the kid. And so it is the actual unit tower, but transformed into this world's version of it. It is the actual Melanie Bush, but transformed into that world's version of it. And the fact that the Doctor and Belinda's kid doesn't exist in the real world, but exists in this one, is meant to be a sign or a trick or an out or something that's going to be relevant in that. Now, I have no reason for knowing that view is correct. It could be that this is an entirely new created world, but certainly my watching of it was very much that it was a transfigurated version of our world.
Right, so the kid only exists in that world. My brain is starting to ping now, Dave, and thinking, okay, what's going to make Shooty regenerate in the next episode if he regenerates? What if he has to give all his Time Lord energy to Poppy to make her real in the real world or something? That's what triggers his regeneration, because they don't want to leave her behind.
Maybe she's the Watcher.
That'd be hilarious. God, I don't put it past RTD either.
I mean, we've had the Rani Omega. Let's have the Watcher as well.
Yeah, why not? Why not, Dave?
Look, I'm to go back to Omega. Look, I was a bit nonplussed by it. I was sort of like, really, a sort of a kind of crap villain from one good story and one ordinary story, and I couldn't help but think of the fact that the chaps over at Flight Through Entirety often use the phrase "Omega controls the Matrix. Who cares?" as their shorthand for a cliffhanger that's meant to be a really big, exciting revelation, but actually no casual member of the audience will ever care about it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm interested to hear what they say on that, because, like, hey everybody, it's Omega. I mean, we sort of mentioned last week that the revelation of the Rani was not going to be a big deal to people who have not watched Dimensions in Time or Time in the Rani. But at least they go through and explain she is a time lady and she's a character and it's Anita Dobbs and all the rest of that. I just think that there's an even bigger level of disconnect with Omega, because at the moment he's an old Time Lord who we haven't even seen. So I just don't know if anybody was sitting there going, oh my God, Omega, wow. Who knows?
Yeah, for folk out there who haven't come across Omega, basically the shtick is he lives in an antimatter universe and would love to come into our universe, but if he comes into our universe, it will blow up, but he doesn't care. And that's kind of the whole Omega story. Yeah. I want to come to your universe. You can't. I want to. You can't. The end.
And look, there's always a certain sense of sort of Greek tragedy about Omega, that he's the one who had to sacrifice his existence to give the Time Lords their power over time. So, there's some good stuff you can do with Omega. I just wasn't that excited by him, sorry.
Do you see RTD doing it in 45 minutes next week?
Let's find out.
Okay.
Rob, we've talked about Omega and the big revelation. A couple of other things that were seeded in there that were surprises. Susan turning up briefly as a flash, I think, does indicate that there is something going to happen with Susan next episode.
Yep, more likely now,
Yes.
Something recorded in that same session where she's on the TARDIS set.
Yeah, so I think that Susan is going to be a part of next week's resolution. I don't quite know how. Jonathan Groff rocked up.
He did. He did.
In a scene that was very obviously just him and a camera on a blue screen.
Yes.
He clearly wasn't interacting with anybody else. His line was very, very clunky, but as you know, I really enjoyed that episode that he was in. What was it called?
Rogue.
Rogue, yes. I actually really enjoyed Rogue. I think I'm one of about 3 people on the planet that enjoyed Rogue, but I did. So I did have a moment of, Jonathan Groff's back. That's really cool. So that was a nice moment for me.
Okay.
I have a note here that simply says, music, FFS. And that's just a comment on the ridiculously over-the-top music that just didn't stop here. And once again, in some key scenes, almost drowned out the dialogue, which was a problem. Mm-hmm. But overall, I was along for this ride. I think that it could all fall in a screaming heap next week. And given RTD's record, there's probably a 60% chance that it will.
Yeah.
But I was sitting there throughout this going, what's going on? What's the cause of this? What's the Rani's plan? Who is the one who waits? Yada, yada, yada. And I was along for the ride.
Oh, that's good. I think it will land differently for different people.
Yeah, it absolutely will. As have many of these episodes over these last few weeks. That, I think, is something we have seen from all the feedback there. There is almost no episode this year that I think has had a universal sort of instant received fan wisdom.
No, some have gone close, but...
The Well's probably the closest.
I'd say so.
Yeah, but I think a lot of them, there's been real hitting different for different people. So I think this one will as well, yes.
All right. Shall we go to the sports desk?
Let's go.
Here we are, Dave, at the sports desk, where we do Word of the Week, Play of the Week, Foul of the Week, MVP of the Week, and afterwards we'll give our scores too. Do you want to kick us off with your Word of the Week?
My Word of the Week was Akbar, as in Admiral Akbar, as in, it's a trap! Because,
I thought it might be.
Yeah, look, it wasn't that difficult to work that one out. I thought you'd get there. But in a couple of levels, because first of all, this was all a trap for the Doctor. And everything that's been going on for this season seems to have been a trap for the Doctor, to the point that him doing stuff with those electric guitar props has been part of what's allowed the Rani to put together the whole thing. So it's all one big long game trap by the Rani, so I get that. But also, I think there were moments in this that were, or at least to me, felt like traps set by RTD for fans. So the moment where the Doctor wakes up and says, "Good morning, wife," and kisses Belinda, I think we're all meant to start screaming and writing notes about the Doctor doing this. And, it actually was a trap, and it wasn't all about that at all. I think there are a number of other things in here that RTD is putting down as, misdirections or traps, whatever you might want to call them. And I think that a lot of these things that we've discussed may land differently when we see the full context. And so I'm perhaps telling myself as a sad middle-aged fan not to fall into his traps.
I got to say, I liked moments like that. I like weird in Doctor Who. I really do. My Word of the Week was alcohol. Alcohol obviously makes you feel drunk. And I felt this story was near incoherent in places, like it was drunk. And I felt like I had a hangover after watching it.
Yeah, well, okay.
Because I was just thinking about things, how did that fit? Is this what I think it is? Is it not? I don't know. Yeah, I felt very strange after finishing this one.
No, fair enough. It clearly did land very differently for each of us.
Having this chat has helped, though. It really has. Do you want to continue on with your Play of the Week?
My Play of the Week was the scene where we meet Conrad, because, as you know, last time I thought Conrad was an interesting character who was played okay, but didn't quite work out. And as I discussed, in the course of this hot take, the misdirection on what I expected Conrad to be and what he turned out to be, the way the actor really played quite well that idea that, he is a prisoner as well, he is suffering as well, and just this idea of what was going on really changed my perception, no pun intended, of this episode. And so just that first scene with Conrad, and do we call her Mrs. Flood now? Do we call her Rani 2? I don't know. The second Rani? Whatever it was, I just thought that was a really nice scene. And also in a episode that was very, very big. Big music and big shots and big dinosaur skeletons or whatever those things were. It was a big, loud episode. That scene really stood out as a really quiet, subtle scene where I've gone, ooh, interesting. They're doing something I hadn't expected. They're explaining it. It's acted really well. This is a lovely scene. So I liked it for a number of reasons.
Okay. My play was the destruction of London, and normally, I don't always go in for big special effects shots, but I think it was well done. The colours and the way bits of the city were dropping down into the ground, the way Unit Tower looks like it's going to fall on Ruby, all of that stuff, the way those big skeleton creatures were sort of toppling over as well. I just thought that was really good. And the Doctor looking down going, no, like, this is not happening. Like, wow. I kind of felt some of his awe in that moment. And I thought that was pretty good for the effects wizards there.
Do you think we're going to get an explanation for the big skeleton creatures, or were they just cool window dressing and just forget about it?
I was hoping we would, but we've now gone a whole episode without it, and they've all just started falling into holes, so they might not even be around next time to explain. So I don't know.
Just weird for the sake of weird, and they're dinosaurs because the Rani likes dinosaurs.
Yeah, and maybe on those Unleashed episodes or whatever they're called, maybe they get explained there. I mean, that's not good enough. You got to explain things in stories, not in after shows. Anyway.
Yeah, or could it be back next week?
It could be. I'll continue on Foul of the Week. I think, and obviously we disagree on this, Dave, I think this script needed another pass or two. I think it really needs to think of what it wants to say, and then say it in a way that's entertaining, and it might have a rug pull here, but isn't so opaque in places that the audience is left frowning and wondering what on earth is happening at times, and just feeling annoyed at random scenes that then get tied together with tons of exposition, which is so extensive. It wasn't even self-aware enough to remark on itself being exposition at one point, as we discussed. I just think this could have been better. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
How about you?
My Foul of the Week, look, there are little things that I potentially could have picked, but noting my word of the week and trying to avoid potential traps that may or may not pay off next week, I've gone for a slightly fun one and said my Foul of the Week is making Dimensions in Time canon.
Okay. Brilliant. Do you want to continue on with your MVP?
My MVP... I was tempted to give it to Jonathan Groff because every moment he's on screen is a delight, but I think the chap who played Conrad gets it this time because he did give a performance that I thought was significantly better, or at least significantly worked for me more than he did in Lucky Day, and he was the key part of my favourite scene, so I think that I had to go with him.
Okay. My MVP I'm giving to the director, who I had to look up. It's Alex Sanjeev Pillai. Because this episode, I felt very bright and open and interesting to look at. I think it did play up that sort of 50s aesthetic. Even though a lot of London looked like modern London, I do get what we've been talking about earlier about it having the 50s vibe, particularly with the fashion and so on. And I think they captured that really well on screen. Some of the sets were a bit dodgy. I think the Rani's tower or base or whatever they were calling it did look like a lot of plywood with a cheap sort of paint job.
Yeah, it did, didn't it?
Yeah, but as something to look at more broadly in terms of like cinematography and all that sort of stuff, I think the director gets the chocolates here.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair call. It definitely was a big and exciting piece of television that built up the tension quite well. So I think that is fair. I will take a point off them for the very obvious close-up of the yellow mug in about scene 2, because I've watched enough television to know that if you're giving a mug its own close-up, that is going to be Chekhov's mug.
Yeah.
And like that was just so unsubtle that, when... And then when Jonathan Groff, Rogue, starts doing the whole tables don't work like that, I thought, who says that?
Yeah.
This is all just so we can have the moment of the mug falling through the table. I just thought that was quite clunky.
Yeah, why not just say, reality's not working. If you want to check, put a coffee cup on the table. It'll fall through, Is that what's happening for you? Yeah.
Yes. This world is an illusion.
Yeah, just say it.
This world is an illusion. This world is an illusion. Go to the tower.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
All right. For a score, I'm giving this 5.5 out of 10. It's my lowest score for the season. I think at least something like Robot Revolution had a story you could follow, even though it was a bit lightweight and silly. This was just, to me, let's be weird and funny and messagey and bright and colourful and not really explain stuff half the time, because that's edgy. And Yeah, on first viewing at least, because maybe on second viewing it'll be different. On first viewing, Dave, this just bounced off me almost completely. Like, bong.
Okay. I have been a little bit generous and I've given it a B+.
Okay, wow.
It is definitely not what my least favourite of the season. In fact, it is better than a number of episodes, in my view, of the season, at least in doing its job as the penultimate episode. As I alluded right back at the start, when we see what part 2 of this one is like, it could be that I just discover that there was absolutely no payoff and this was a complete shallow, false episode, and I'll revise my score down. It could be that this is setting up next week perfectly for a great payoff, and maybe it'll even go up to an A, but I will stick to a B+ for now. It was a good adventure with a lot of open ends to be discovered.
Yeah, and that's completely fair. And maybe next week I'll like it more than I did this week because it'll do something amazing. But for me in this episode, RTD's written something he perceives, is full of fun scenes. He's layered in messaging that means a lot to him. The special effects are going off. These aren't bad ingredients, but for me it just doesn't work. To me, it's like a 60-something-year-old man's fevered attempt to write something epic in the age of Marvel, and it just feels clunky to me, Dave. So bring on next week. I'm curious to see how it'll all, wrap up.
Yeah, and it's worth highlighting at this point that when we get to our cold take at the end of June, there is at least one episode where I have significantly revised my opinion up as I've thought about it more. There is at least one episode I've significantly revised my opinion down as I've thought about it more. So these hot takes, as we say every week, are very, very hot takes. Yeah. And often it is the conversations and the exchanges that we have with other fans, whether it's online, listening to other podcasts, that do tease out these thoughts, make us see things we hadn't seen or push ideas, and we go, for better or for worse.
Yeah, I've seen Pool to Open's podcast has dropped. I'll be listening to that, possibly even tonight, to see what they say, and many others, and it's always an interesting thing to hear those other hot takes.
It is, but we're getting very close to breaking our rule of a review going longer than the episode itself, so we should probably finish up there. But we will be back tomorrow with our monthly show as well, and if you've had too much RTD and too much New Who, that's okay, because we're going back to 1970 to dive deep into the Ambassadors of Death, so a bit of a change of pace for us in our monthly show, plus a news wrap-up and all the rest of it.
The Doctor Who show with too much Doctor Who is barely enough. We're living up to that title this weekend, Dave.
Absolutely, and if all goes well, we'll record our next student TARDIS tomorrow. So, lots of Doctor Who coming up.
Wow, good stuff. But until tomorrow, Dave, I've been Rob.
I've been Dave.
We'll see you next time on the Doctor Who show.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.